We're live. Agency, true to form. We are starting the first Sunday sermon of the Church of Korihor late. It's church. You know how it goes. When I was a kid, they had a phenomenon they called the Mormon miracle. That was where the parking lot of every Mormon church house was empty until 5 minutes before sacrament meeting. The Mormon miracle. Well, we're having a Korihor catastrophe. I've written most of this sermon and decided I'll just finish it up from the heart. This is the first sermon I'll have preached since I was a God believer. And I do think that godless people need, good morning, Gene. Godless people need sermons. And this will be the first. I'm going to screw it up. And then next week, we're going to have another one, possibly somebody else deliver one. We're working on that. And they will screw it up less. And we'll do it less and less until eventually we'll figure it out what a Sunday sermon is supposed to look like. We've got some ideas. We're bouncing some things around. How atheists and agnostics, apatheist, good morning, Culch. Welcome to church. That some of you never wanted to hear that again. After I am finished with my comments, we are going to deal with some church business. Then we will post this sermon on the website for the Church of Korihor, which is korihor.org. You can go there, you can click around, try and break it, and it'll probably be pretty easy because we are still working on it. So for this part, I'm going to introduce the Korihor stole. This will be a luminary stole. There'll be a natural color like this. And then one day, if luminaries want to become heralds in the Church of Korihor, part of the process, the ordination process, will be that they will dye their natural colored linen stole in the color of the directors or of the heralds, or whatever else we come up with between here and there, because frankly, we're making this shit up as we go. All right. Little coffee. I was telling Culch yesterday, Cultural Hall, by text message. That's right. I got Rob on the phone. Be very jealous. That the ideal is when my Adderall hits just at the right moment with the caffeine, and then I sent him a GIF of Superman and Lois Lane flying. He thought it was funny. You had to be there. You weren't, but you had to be. So when a person is ordained to become a luminary, you're in the foyer, Gene in the foyer. He doesn't have a crying baby. Get him in here. Get him into the chapel. Those of you out there have never been Mormon. Some of this will be very Mormon. When luminaries are ordained to the Church of Korihor, they do not have to be members of the church. You're welcome, Gene. They are people who are on a mission for the Church of Korihor to accomplish the objectives of the Church of Korihor. And so they don't have to be members of our church, but they are ordained clergy. It's a little bit cart before the horse. We wouldn't have it any other way. We're trying to do things. We're trying to do church as least like the God believers as freaking possible. And here's the thing. I'm going to start this sermon in a moment. And I want you to be thinking, the Church of Korihor is a joke to many people. It's not to me. I've been thinking about this for a couple decades, actually. Not now, Joe. God's flying spaghetti monster. Not now. All right. The best thing about the Church of Korihor is that other people will think it's a joke. So they won't look too deeply at it. Well, we become the saviors that we are waiting for, and they won't get involved. And right now, I am in a sifting out phase, or starting a sifting out phase, to discover who's going to help us to build this thing. And if it's not you, if you don't feel a connection to it, then just go back to whatever mundane thing you were doing before and forget I said anything. But if you feel it and you want to be involved and you want to help to transform people's lives, after the sermon, I'm going to tell you how you can go to korihor.org and get started on your path to become a luminary, because we need people. We need people who will help us to shape what the future of this looks like. And so, let us sermonize. We're going home. I want to tell you the story of the Korihor Sigil, or the COAS. That's the symbol of the Church of Korihor. Now, we're a church for godless people, so it's probably no surprise that this story, it's kind of geeky. In April 1970, Apollo 13 was on the third mission to land on the moon. But 2 days into the journey, an oxygen tank in their service module exploded, crippling the spacecraft and leaving astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes in a desperate fight to get home alive. To save on power, they had to shut down most of the electronics on their spacecraft, really virtually all of them, including the guidance computer that charted their way home. Now, for most of the flight, they were able to whip around the moon instead of landing on it without the main navigation computer. But on their way back toward Earth, they discovered that they were coming in too shallow and too fast. Unless they corrected course and slowed down, they would bounce off the Earth's atmosphere into space, where they surely would die. Between Aquarius and Houston, they figured that they could manually fire the lunar module's engine, which still had some juice in it because they didn't land on the moon. But they would only have 14 seconds of fuel to spare. If they overcorrected the trajectory and came in too steep, they could burn up in the atmosphere or be crushed by the G-force before they hit the water. This one was for all the cards. They could have one shot. Told you I'd screw it up. They would have only one shot and no room for error. Now, if you're going to be stuck in outer space without a guidance computer, the guy you want with you is Jim Lovell, the commander of Apollo 13. When Lovell was the command module pilot on Apollo 8, Mission Control had him rehearse this exact scenario. How would you get home without a guidance computer? This is NASA, so they had planned for that. Astronaut means sailor of the stars, but really every sailor is an astronaut, because one of humanity's greatest instruments has been the sextant, an instrument to judge your place on the Earth, usually, by measuring your placement to the stars. Well, the Apollo 13 service module had a modern version of a sextant built into it. And Jim Lovell was the first man in space to navigate to the moon and back, at least partly, with only the stars to go by. But Apollo 13 had a problem that Apollo 8 did not. Debris from the explosion obscured Lovell's view so that he couldn't see the stars through the sextant. Hard to navigate by stars that you can't see. This is where it would be easy to give up. The crew of Aquarius could blame Houston. Houston could blame them. They could despair and shut down. These are always options. But none of those options were a way home. That's when Jim Lovell came up with a pretty innovative idea. The Crewman Optical Alignment Site, or COAS. Well, I'm not sure that's how they said it. That's the way I said it since I read it, and it sounds very NASA-ish. So, the COAS on the lunar module. Now, the COAS is basically like the crosshairs of a rifle scope, designed to align the two parts of the spacecraft while they were docking. Now, Lovell fixed that bullseye instead on the only fixed point in space that he could see through the lunar module window. Earth. More specifically, the terminator line on Earth. In the Apollo 13 official report, there's a diagram of exactly what Lovell and his team had to do to correct their trajectory in 14 seconds. To get home, Lovell and Fred Hayes would fire the engines and control the yaw and pitch while also trying to slow down from the acceleration. They chose the Earth's terminator line, the line between the day and night sides of the Earth, as the reference point. By keeping the terminator line aligned in the COAS, Lovell could ensure the spacecraft was oriented correctly for the burn. For 14 seconds, they fired that engine, keeping the Earth's terminator line lined up in the COAS, with Jim controlling the yaw and the burn and Fred manning the pitch, and Jack timing the burn on his watch. They fired the engines and corrected that angle in 14 seconds, and they made it home. Now I want to show you something. This is that Apollo 13 report. It shows the terminator line as it looked in the COAS on Apollo 13, and I love this image. I took this very image and used it to draw the shape of the Korihor Sigil. And that is as much of this sermon as I have written. I'd like to say that that's because I wanted to finish off this sermon with more from the heart messaging. I ran out of time and I had to stop and get coffee, because if I don't have my coffee, well, you won't like me on Sunday mornings. But I just wanted to show this to you. One of the most surprising things about starting the Church of Korihor is how nobody seems to have been curious about that weird symbol up in the corner of your screen right now. That's on the website, and it's on all of our church materials. This is the story of the Korihor Sigil, also known as the COAS. I've even gotten a metal fabricator to fabricate us up some little collar sigils, I'm calling them, that are made out of steel, and with magnetic backing, the luminaries and the heralds and directors will be able to attach them to whatever article of clothing you are wearing. Basically, if you're comfortable in it and feel confident and look good in it, hey, now that's officially liturgical garb of the Church of Korihor. And then for official proceedings, you'll have the stole. Luminaries, again, will be, so far the plan is for the luminaries to wear a light colored or bleached or just natural color stole, similar to this one. Hey, Jenny Gage is here. I love it. Your son asked about that. That's great. Hi, Jenny. I mentioned before, those of you who are just joining us, we're thinking about possibly the ordination process of luminaries who deciding if that they want to join the church, because again, you don't have to join the church. You're welcome to join the church to become a luminary, but you don't have to in order to go on a mission for the Church of Korihor. We do things cart before the horse here. And we're going to try it and see if it fails. And if it fails, we abandon it and start over. But part of the ordination process will be that we'll take these, the luminaries will bring their, who want to be ordained, will complete the seminary or the symposium for the heraldry. And when they've completed it, they will come to a symposium where they will put their Korihor stole into a box where they will heat it up, and then they will dye it the color of the ministry that they're moving into. I think it's going to be cool. And then we're going to come up with a few of these metallic clasps that you'll be able to use to hold it together in a variety of different ways. And basically, when you are performing a wedding or when you are performing a life celebration or something like that, you'll wear the stole, representing that you are illuminating the world. So, with this light of reason, the Church of Korihor, we worship the light of reason. Now I just wanted, thank you for reposting. That's great, you guys. Thank you for that. So this is what I want to tell you. Okay. You see that little symbol up in the upper right-hand corner. Our lives are like the Crewman Optical Alignment Site. We find ourselves today in a position where we don't have the guidance computer that our parents sent us on this mission for and with. Our plan, the life that we were supposed to live, it just isn't there. It's not going according to plan. And we find ourselves in a world lacking in moral leadership. There's a vacuum of moral leadership. Instead of the John F. Kennedy that we need, we have Donald Trump. Instead of a Dr. King, who was a flawed man, but who moved people, instead we have people like Russell M. Nelson, the Big 15 of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who frankly have a foot in the grave. And sometimes I wonder if their God was real, if he wouldn't call them into it. I wish no violence on anyone, by the way. When people have heard me say that, a few people have commented to me that they are asking if I consider myself that leader. The honest answer is yes, but not the leader, a leader. Right now, around the world, there are smart people who work in therapy, people who work in nonprofits, people who work in construction, people who work in mortgage lending, people who work in banking. There are people who work in cooking for people. There are people who work making clothing for people. There are people who work in all sorts of capacities to help corporations earn profit, pay taxes to governments, and then even pay taxes to churches they call tithing. The Church of Korihor, we also believe in tithing because, well, frankly, I'm bankrolling this whole thing so far. As soon as we have a bank account, we got to collect some tithing too. But as I told my directors the first day that we signed the documents for the Church of Korihor, which I am definitely going to get filed this week as soon as I can clear up an address issue of all things, so that we can get the EIN number and we can start receiving donations to a bank account. And then luminaries for the Church of Korihor will be ordained. And we will be setting up accounts, sub-accounts to the church's account, or in some cases, if you already have a business or a project, and we arrange to just give you a grant or sponsorship so that you can manage your own affairs, as long as the church can account for how the money is raised and how the money is spent. What will happen is that luminaries will get paid out of donations to the church. And you will go out and collect donations from people that you know. People, if you're an influencer, people can donate and give to that. That's right, financial transparency. I'm glad Beth Magnetic is here. I love that. I love that girl. I really do. You guys should check out Mormon True Crime when you can. In fact, on korihor.org, there's a page that's called transparency. Right now, it basically says, when there's transparency to report, it'll be here. My ambition, and don't hold me to this, is that one day we will take the main accounts of the Church of Korihor and take the statements, block out the information to keep cybersecurity, keep with cybersecurity, and then we'll just take the bank statements themselves and we'll just publish them, and then people can see where all the money goes. And because in spite of what many people including well-meaning people I love very much, have thought I did not start this church to get rich. And if I did, I'm already failing badly at it. But failing is something I do. This is the thing. And to my Christian friends out there or religious friends, forgive me for this part, but you did show up to a godless sermon. So just like the Earth in the Terminator line in the COAS on Apollo 13, we can't make this world into the world that it needs to be without being able to see the world as it really is. There are moments in our lives where the stars that we have always lived by won't be visible from where we are, and our sextant isn't going to work. Many of us know what that's like because the fastest growing religious segment in the United States and throughout most of Western society, I'm sure throughout the rest of the world, are people who identify as none or no affiliation to any church whatsoever. You know what I'm talking about. You don't have stars to go by anymore, since we figured out that by sharing information, we can figure out all the ways in which God is not there, is not real, no matter how badly people want him to be. I, for one, though I have been very good at playing an angry atheist, I was one of those people who did not want God to be real anymore, but who remembered what it was like to believe in God, to believe that there is a meaning to our suffering. Now, I don't know that there's no God, but I certainly don't know that there is one. But I can tell you what I do know, and that's suffering. And I'm not going to bore you with my entry into the misery Olympics. That's not the point. I talk to people every day on my podcast about true crime, and now about Church for Atheists. And the more people I talk to, the more I realize the hell that our people are living through. There's trauma, there's depression, and a hell of a lot of neurospiciness like mine. I felt so alone so many years of my life, feeling like I was the only one who felt this way, knowing that that couldn't possibly be true, and finding out a little too late in life that it was just that my autism meant that I was bad at reaching out to other people and communicating. And while it is not fair that I should have to change who I am or how I behave in order to be successful at something, I have to. Because just like the crew of Apollo 13, I have to see the world as it really is. And then I have to decide, am I going to lay down and just bounce off the atmosphere, come in too steep and crush? Sometimes it's tempting. Sometimes it's tempting for 24 to 72 hours, strangely enough. But that's not a way home. People say that it's never an option. Well, that's bullshit. It's always an option. It's always an option. But it's not an option that gets us to the world we want. I've been working for a while on another sermon I call The Basement. It's not nearly as hopeful as this one. I decided not to tell it this time. Maybe I'll change my mind in the future. We'll see how depressed I get doing this. But where I talk about how in this world, it's like we've all been brought down into a basement and bad things happen to us. Let's just say it that way, without using any internet-y unsafe words. We were all brought into this life without our consent. And then once we got here, We were not gently until one day we die. And it's natural for our nervous systems, literally, to play dead. I've been learning a lot about this thing called polyvagal theory. Some of you I've talked to briefly about it. And then you may have been startled at how I don't really seem to finish what I'm trying to say with it. Well, that's because I haven't fully figured out what it means. But I think that it's perhaps the most important thing I've ever learned in my life. And that's that our autonomic nervous system, they say, I heard this on one of Sam Harris's podcasts back in the day when he had the Waking Up podcast. And he said, they say that you have more brain cells in your viscera, in your gut, than an average canine has in its skull. You have a whole layer of intelligence we don't yet understand, calculating information just like you do in your head, but in your body. And you have this gut reaction to things. They don't know how it works, but it turns out it's not just a feeling and not just indigestion, or at least not indigestion all the time. You can actually continue to calculate in your body what your head doesn't quite understand. And one of the things that happens when we do that from an evolutionary standpoint is that the fish brain in our brain has one set of nerves that goes to the ventral part of your body, your gut, your viscera, and so forth. And here, in the upper part of your body, that does what a fish does in a situation where it feels threatened. It plays dead, or at least our ancestors did. And unlike now, people say, if evolution is real, why are there no, intermediate links in the evolutionary chain? And they're little, and let me tell you, you want to piss somebody off who thinks that. I say, there is one, it's you. And they say, how dare you? No, it's true. You go into embryology. If you look at embryology, you find that every single human being ever born is every kind of animal that our ancestors were, going back to the first multicellular organisms, at least. And we have all evolved. We are all the intermediate link. Thank you, Beth. That's right. We are all linked to all of our ancestors. We have evolved. Not just that they have evolved, we each have evolved from primordial sludge that happened in a way we won't go over because, because. And then from that primordial sludge into the being that you are now, you have evolved. You have gone through the entire evolutionary process of the human species. And that's pretty fucking great. How many F words do I get? I know that Kulch knows. Is Kulch still here? That's pretty great. But that means that sometimes you go straight into freeze. Once upon a time, they believed that the only response to danger was fight or flight, which turns out to be one thing. But then people reported that there are moments in your life where you're so threatened, your body actually, they didn't call it that there was a third response, freeze, which is really a second response. That was the less evolved, more primordial version of our self-defense mechanism. We learned how to play dead, and maybe it would go away. Maybe it will get bored with us. Maybe it will think we're dead and it will leave us alone, whatever the danger is. And our brains evolved as we evolved the ability to see and to hear, evolved the ability to see things like red or hear a certain pitch sound like a scream. And from the most basic primordial level, primal level, our bodies learn to react to these things and say, play dead. That's freeze. Then as we evolved and moved on to land, Our ancestors obviously grew another bundle of nerves in what's known as the vagus nerve or the vagal nerve bundle. And this became the dorsal side of our autonomic nervous system, or the part of your nervous system that works without your needing to think about it. And that dorsal reaction had to go further down the spine to the lower parts of your body, partially because you needed to lose weight in case you had to run. And so we developed a response that's not polite to talk about in polite company. We developed a response to a threat that's a totally different thing. Dump the waste and get out of here. Flight. Or turn around, pump adrenaline into the muscles, and turn around and fight. So there are moments in our lives, this new theory develops, that your brain and your body, your autonomic nervous system, respond to threats in two phases, basically. I call it the red alert, yellow alert. And red alert on the Starship Enterprise, as I understand it, everything functions differently. All the transportation on and off the ship has to go through the bridge. Everything, all the torpedo bays load. All of the phaser banks charge. Everything is set to stop and fight or get out, right? That's red alert. And you have a red alert. That's your fight or flight. Then there's a yellow alert. The yellow alert just illuminates yellow and warns all the crew everywhere on the ship, we're in danger. Brace. Something may happen. Keep a lookout. See something, say something. Everybody freeze, because something could go wrong any minute. Do your work, but do it carefully and be aware. And that's like your body. You have a yellow alert. And it turns out this new theory, polyvagal theory, posits that if you have to go through a certain cycle to get from red alert to yellow alert back to safe or nothing, no alert. One version of that is called autism. One version of that is called CPTSD. And they are perhaps two different variations of the same thing. Another theory, and again, this is only a theory, and the testing on it has been somewhat sparse from what I have read so far. And it's a lot of scientific language. So, and I'm not a scientist. I'm just a person who likes to read science and then act smart. But I want to know the truth. And the thing that they're positing is that possibly even borderline personality disorder, possibly also bipolar disorder, are also variations of these responses. I don't know if this is true yet. And if it turns out to be false, well, then we'll call it out as false when it's called out as false. And until it's proven true, we won't take it as true. That's what sciencey people do. But I'll tell you what I feel. I feel like we are in a crisis in this country right now. I feel like America is in crisis. I feel like we are not the only ones, because I look to my neighbors in Canada and I look to our neighbors in Mexico, and I keep an eye on what's going on in Latin America, though it's been some years since I've been there. And I can tell you right now, they are not doing much better. As a matter of fact, we may be faring better than most. I was mentioning to Nate, who's one of our directors, one of our founding directors for the church. I mentioned this before. I recently discovered that since they cut benefits in 2017, when some major political changes happened in America, I'm not going to say any more than that, but some major political changes happened in America. And part of it was that they cut a lot of benefits for feeding people. In 2018, more than 9,000 people, for the first time, as far as I can tell, since the Great Depression, more than 9,000 people in America starved to death. And a disproportionately large number of them were seniors. It makes me so damn mad. Sorry. By 2022, which is the most recent year that they've reported, because, the government does everything at least 1 year in arrears, publishes things at least 1 year in arrears. By 2022, that number had doubled to more than 22,000 people. It dipped in 2020 because a lot of those hungry people passed from other things. It's hard to keep alive and fight a virus when you're hungry. We're in moral crisis here. And the killer is in the house. For 2,000 years, gods and governments have had plenty of opportunities to prove they were worth a damn. And I think they've done the best they could. I'm not impressed. And I don't think you are either. The truth is that in order to solve a problem, you need not only to see the world, the real world, as you want it to be, you must also be willing to see it as it is. And I'm sorry to say this in the presence of anybody who came to a godless sermon expecting to hear something that confirmed God to you. But only the godless people do that. Only godless people see that there is no objective meaning to any of this suffering. We have to make that meaning. But how do you make meaning in a world that has none? The answer is, for me, that we look inside and we ask ourselves something very deep and personal, and we get in touch with our autonomic nervous system and ask within what they sometimes call the inner child, that person inside that knows that you've been left home with the credit card and the keys. Do they know? Do they know I have the credit card and I can charge anything I want on it? Do you know? That part of you. Maybe you don't have that. But that just means you're out of touch with your inner child. You should do some work. We need to be able to look inside and ask ourselves, what do we want? I remember when Apollo 13, the movie, came out. I was a teenager, and it was the best movie I had seen in quite some time. Ron Howard, no surprise there. And I loved it. I'm a movie geek, as many of you know. I'm a failed filmmaker, 30 years experience going on failing at filmmaking because I don't know how to raise money. Well, I didn't know how to raise money. I'm learning a lot about it since. And so I didn't know how to ask people to lend me money for a venture where they definitely aren't going to get their money back. Well, almost definitely not going to get their money back. And many times thought, man, if I had a church, this would be easy because I can say, here, I'll give you a tax receipt. You can file it on your taxes. Don't give your money to the government. Give it to me. And then there were these moments where I went, that's true. And then just moved on. Okay. It's actually some more of that. I think maybe I'll talk about in a minute here. But the point is, I saw this movie and there's this moment. I'm not sure. I think it's true to the book by Jim Lovell. So we have Jim Lovell's word for it anyway, where he turns to Fred Hayes and Jack Swigert while they are when they're going around the moon and not landing on it, but instead using its gravity to slingshot home again. And they have a moment to pity themselves because they didn't go to the moon. They went to the moon. They didn't go around, but they shot around it and they didn't get to land on it. They didn't get to be Neil. They didn't get to be Buzz. They didn't get to do that. And that was the whole point, to go to the moon. And in the movie, Tom Hanks says to Bill Paxton and Kevin Bacon, 0 Degrees, he says, gentlemen, what are your intentions? I'd like to go home. I look at life these days the way that Sam Harris described it in his famous eulogy. You don't know this, you should look it up. It's called It Is Always Now. Blow your mind. At an atheist conference in Melbourne, Australia, I believe, when Christopher Hitchens passed. It was a sad day for a lot of us. And he said something very profound that sticks with me. I think about it probably every day, especially when things are hard. Sam Harris said, "Death is not an emergency. Life is the emergency." And never do I feel like that has been more true than I feel it is right now. You and I are living in an emergency. We can't see the stars, and our guidance computer isn't working. We have to line up the real world in the COAS. We have to use courage. We have to use tenacity and innovation. And more than anything else, we're going to need to use a little bit of math. We're going to have to science the shit out of this if we're going to make a world that we want to live in. And to do that, you need godless people. This is our time. This is the time when we need atheists and agnostics and apatheists, or whatever you even say that word, and people who are dispassionate about God, dispassionate about religion. This is the time when we need more of those people than ever before to get religion. But instead of a religion about God, we need a religion about us. We are our saviors. We are the heroes we've been waiting for. We are the Jim Lovels and the Fred Hayeses and the Jack Swaggarts of our lives and our world. And it's going to take some organization. And it's going to take some courage. And it's going to take some science. And those are things that godless people are especially good at. This is our time. When people think I mean that I am that leader that is needed in America and in the world today, I say, you think too small. I'm not that leader alone. I'm looking for at least one leader in every state of the United States of America. And ideally, 2 or 3, maybe some more. In 2025, I want to have a luminary in every state in the union. This will be a part-time job. You will be officially a volunteer as a luminary for the Church of Korihor. Again, you don't have to join the church to be a luminary. You do have to agree to our standards and to support the 12 values of Korihorism, and go over those in a minute. And you have to pass a background check, and you have to be fingerprinted. That's not optional, and it is, as far as I know, the first church I know of where that's been required. So the fact of the matter is, if you turn out to be an a-hole, we're going to burn you and say we had nothing to do with you from the beginning. And a lot of people who are a-holes, we're never, you don't know until it's too late. And so there are going to be some people who are going to sneak in through the works, and we are going to burn them on their way out. So be a luminary, please, but be aware, if you're an a-hole, that's written into the bylaws of the Church of Korihor. Some of you in the future, by the time you see this, you'll be able to go to the Church of Korihor and read the bylaws. If you read them now, they're not complete. We've had to change some things. But in the bylaws of the Church of Korihor, the first herald can kick out anybody. I hate to tell you this, but basically, if you're going to join the church or if you're going to be ordained into the church, you only vote in the general ballot. And yes, there's a general ballot written into the bylaws every January 1st of the year, where questions put forth by the directors, who in the future will be elected, will be submitted to people who are members of the church. As a member of the church, you will pay tithing of $2 a month. So just be prepared. Don't get started if you're not financially in a position. After 1 year of membership in the Church of Korihor, you will be able to vote in the ballot. And that's right. Beth can join just to get excommunicated again. Dope. I've done it. It's fun. Everybody should try it once. Culture. Just kidding. I don't even know. Cultural Hall is excommunicated. Anyways, but between here and 1 year from now, when the first ballot will be cast and the first questions put together by the directors will be placed, one that they can put up is a process we've written into the bylaws. And by we, I mean me. There's a lot of royal we in the we's of the Church of Korihor. One will be called remuneration. And remuneration means that we will take all of the heralds and put them on the same level. There will be no first, second, third, fourth, fifth herald at that point. And then I'm thinking probably ranked choice voting, we will remunerate who are the leaders of the Church of Korihor. And that point in time, it's very possible that I will not be the first herald of the Church of Korihor. Somebody else will be. And the membership of the church will choose somebody else to be our leader. And that is the only way that I can feel confident to fill this role now. But that's after a year. Coach, you got to get on this wagon, man. It's great. No, people have families. And many of their families are still Mormon. I did it for 10 years. I was still a Mormon before I was brought before a court of love. I've told that story before. People are tired of it. But I'm not going to kid you. For the first year, it's going to be a little bit cult of Joe. And I'm sorry for that. But it's just because nobody's made it to a year yet, and we're still figuring out who the members of this church are going to be, who are going to have the power to vote. And so that's why I say, unlike God churches, we're not out to convert the whole world. We're not out to bring salvation to the world. We have no great commission from Jesus. I don't believe in Jesus. I'm fine with it. If you think that Jesus was a real person, he may very well have been. But I don't think for a minute that he's the person you read about in the Gospels. Not for a minute. And frankly, I don't find the person I read about in the Gospels to be that compelling. Although maybe that's because I grew up in a Christian environment, in a Christian world. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's the case. But I want to see, in the cult of Joe, cup of Joe, cult of Joe, same difference, right? The cup of Joe, the cult of Joe, and a little bit of Adderall. Adderall is with us. Who can be against us? The future that we are going to build together is going to be based largely on how we shape the Church of Korihor in 2025. So I am only asking people to join in who I think I can trust to shape the future of the Church of Korihor if I were not leading it. I want to find those leaders who can see themselves out there serving other people. And in a moment, I'm going to talk about how you can do that right now. And those leaders who see themselves in that role for the rest of their lives, who will bring their experience to helping us to solve problems like housing, like training for a job, future-proof job skills, like our missions of care, where we will be, I hope to get some mental health care and body health care, physical health care to more people who aren't able to afford it. And where we will do more for we will create a missions of patronage, in which we will support artists in creating art, something I'm passionate about, creating art in the future and getting paid so that they don't have to go hungry, so that there can be no starving artists as long as there's a Church of Korihor to support artists in creating work, especially if that work is blasphemous, which is a sacrament in the Church of Korihor, or it will be soon anyway. We need luminaries. There will be volunteers, and the plan at current is that we will create sub-accounts for the missions of reason, and the luminaries will be serving in those missions of reason. Some of those will be managed by the heralds or the official church leadership, myself at this point, and some of them will be managed by heralds and or luminaries who are out there in the field already have the infrastructure, already have the business, already have facilities, already have connections, already have money to get going. We'll ordain them, give them a grant or a letter of sponsorship, and they will just take off and go as luminaries of the Church of Korihor, and they will get things done in their way. My ambition in the future is that we will eventually have enough people paying $2 a month and whatever else you can if you feel like donating to the Church of Korihor. We will hire people who have a Rolodex of corporations and leaders, high net worth individuals who every year are looking for tax breaks and who will then raise money for the missions of reason. 100 pennies of every dollar that will be donated to the missions of reason will go to the luminaries, to the people on the ground doing the work, so that they can buy the materials, get the equipment, get the van, get the gas, get whatever they need, and then compensate themselves if there's money. Hopefully there's money enough involved in that. Compensate themselves for their time. Because one of the biggest travesties I see in churches like the Mormon church, and I'm sorry that there's so much Mormon content in this, but you know how it is. You talk about what you know, is that we ask people to volunteer their time and then get reimbursed later by the church's central government. And the problem with that is we all know exactly what's happening. Ensign Peak Advisors is what's happening. The church is profiting from that money. They want all the money to go to the church and they get redistributed. But in Korihor's church, we don't do that. In the light of reason, we don't do that. I mean to make the heraldry the servants of the luminaries. We heralds who are members of the church, or will be as soon as it's officially filed with the state of Utah and has an EIN number from the IRS, that's where we get designated. Our role is to serve the luminaries. More than even serving the members of the church, we serve the luminaries. Our job is to give them the power, is to raise money for them, is to give them the organization to do the work. I've said this before, and it's to some controversy. To affect change in the world, you have to have the use of force. Whether we like it or not, whether we like to think of it that way or not, there's a violence involved in progress. Even if that violence is just violence against fate. These are going to be longer. This is the the second version of the stole. And I'm finding everything is in fours with these things I'm doing. That up there is number one, that sculpture up there. That's the Oath of Reason sculpture I've been working on, and it cracked just 2 days ago. So probably going to trash that one and start over. But I learned a lot, and that's part of what we're going to be doing. This is how we're going to do this in the Church of Korihor. We're going to fail, and I'm an expert at that. I excel at failing. We're going to fail for a while, and then we're going to do it again, but faster. And we're going to do it again but faster. We're going to do it again, but faster, until eventually we figure out all the wrong ways to make a better world. Or we make a better world. Die trying. This is what I'm going to be spending the rest of my life working on, whatever capacity I can. And I need people to help me. One of the first missions that we're going to engage in is a mission that was inspired by Nate, one of my friend and one of the founding directors of the Church of Korihor. Here in Utah, we have warming centers for people who are cold. This is a small project, but it's a big one too. And there aren't enough people out there who care. And in fact, there are people here in Utah, we won't name names. We've done enough of that. Nate, it's good to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming to church. There are people out there who are actually voting to shut down and remove these warming centers here in Utah. I went with Nate at his invitation and spent just Nate, less than an hour, I think, to a church in Salt Lake City, the Episcopal Church, where I just showed up to help clean some bathrooms, scrubbed a couple of floors mainly. Didn't do much of anything, but he said, you ought to see how this works. When I got there, there'd been people who'd been there all night, feeding people on what was a code blue. As I understand it, Nate, it's when the temperature is projected to drop below 18 degrees. That's lower than the freezing point of water, and you're mostly made of water. And that's what it takes for them to open up warming centers to get people out of the cold so that they won't die. And there are people trying to get it shut down. And these warming centers up there in Salt Lake and down here in American Fork and down in Provo, I've been in contact with a few of the people organizing these interdisciplinary people, interdenominational organizations. It's amazing. These interdenominational organizations that are organizing mainly churches who are opening their doors to let people sleep between the pews, to let people sleep in the halls, to get them out of the cold. And asking them, what do you need? If there was a church for atheists that's starting up here in Utah, what do you need? And they said, blankets, used blankets. And I said, used blankets? We'll get new blankets. We'll buy blankets that are fancy and neat. We'll get a quilting club together and we'll quilt fancy, amazing blankets. I was talking to Nate, and this is my new philosophy, and it's working, I think, so far. This failure is failing slowly. It's weird. I ask people who know what they're talking about. I said that to Nate on a podcast we did recently, a live broadcast we did on Hellfire Agency, and he said, no, don't get expensive blankets. Don't make fancy blankets. And I said, why? These people are people. They need blankets that will keep them warm. Why? And he said, because on the streets, a fancy blanket makes you a target. Aha. This is why you ask somebody who knows what they're doing. This is why you don't just get volunteers to make it up from scratch. You get people who've done it. Nate's done this for a long time. He's volunteered. And he says those blankets will get dirty. They will get beat up. They will get ripped up. And I said, you make it sound like they should almost be disposable. And he said, yeah, that's about right. They need to be warm. They need to be good. But they need to be somewhat disposable, because on the street, they won't last long. And that's why they want used blankets. Totally changed my outlook. In the 48 hours after that Thanksgiving night, that and mourning, the morning after Thanksgiving Day. What is that? It's a Native American Appreciation Day, I think, Native Peoples Day in America. And I think is it Thanksgiving in Canada? I don't remember. And we went after that. I sent him a link and I said, we can get polar fleece. It's fleece, if you don't know, doesn't fray at the ends. So you don't even have to hem it. You don't even have to have a sewing machine. And you can just cut it right off the roll, blanket. Cut another one, blanket. And these polar fleece is just basically, as I understand it, fleece that is really, really thick. And it's supposed to make the best blankets for the extreme cold that we have out there. Now, in the future, we're probably going to figure out a way to make waterproof blankets simply and without needing a lot of extra effort and a lot of extra work. But Nate and I were talking, that's perfect. We can, yes, go out, collect as many blankets, used blankets as we can. I already, here in American Fork, I've already got people asking me. I was just picking up coffee at the gas station, the Hearts station, which is now an On the Run, over by my house, where I used to work at night to make extra money, trying to save money to buy a house that I still can't afford to buy, and I will probably never be able to afford to buy a house in America. I was just there at this place where I used to work the graveyard shifts after working all day in marketing. Now I work as a paralegal too. I basically have 4 jobs between Hellfire Agency and First Herald of the Church of Korihor, which so far costs me more money than I make. As a matter of fact, I've not made a penny. And then I'm also a paralegal, and I am and I'm still working in marketing, video marketing, and I haven't slept in quite some time. So, cheers. I was just getting this, and I was telling some old retirees, well, excuse me, gentlemen, some retirees, I don't know if any of them made it to church today, that I'm giving my first sermon since I was a Mormon missionary, and I'm giving it to a bunch of godless people. They think that's hilarious. And some of you are not godless. I just want to acknowledge you in the room. And they said to me, what about the blankets thing? You were saying something about blankets. And I said, yeah, the Church of Korihor is going to collect blankets. Right now, I don't have a van that's going to be big enough to carry them here in Utah, but we're going to actually start making blankets and collecting blankets all throughout the United States and delivering them to warming centers everywhere. We're going to organize a massive effort. And for the spring of 2025, we are going to go out and we are going to put blankets in every warming center we can. And then when they don't have room for our blankets, we're going to go out onto the streets and we're going to put them on people. We're going to go to the camps where people sleep in their cars. You know how many people in this country sleep in a car, live out of the car? And we're going to go out there and you're going to get blankets. I was telling my son Elijah, who's only 14 years old, and it was a little disturbed when I told him that, you know, he couldn't join the Church of Korihor till he's 18 because we believe that religion is not for minors. And he said, are there children? I said, I'm sure there are out there. And he said, well, I can go to Joann's and get fleece that has superhero patterns on it. We can make superhero patterns. He said, Mom showed me how to tie fleece together to make really warm blankets. He said, maybe I can. He said, maybe I can't join the Church of Korihor, but maybe I can make blankets for the children. And we're going this week, and we're going to go buy that fleece, and we're going to do it. We can make the world that we want to see. That is the home, the real world that we can see in our COAS. That real world, we have to be able to see it as it is, while keeping in our mind the world that we want to see in that COAS. because we've got 14 seconds of fuel to burn here. This is our flash in the dark. This is our time. This is our moment. And we can't wait on the government to solve these problems. We can't wait on God believers to solve it. Boy, that's for sure. And those God believers believe that only churches can do this work, that it should be private institutions that are raising the money, that are putting in the work, that are hiring the people, because the private sector does everything better than the government can. Well, historically, that's not been true. But whether or not it's true, the decision has now been made that that's who has power in this country and in this future. If churches are the only ones who are going to have the power to raise this kind of money, to ordain people to do work, and to go out and do the job, then atheists, agnostics, apatheists, godless people, nuns with an O, not a U, we're making a huge mistake in deciding that we get offended over the word church. Because while we never wanted to go back to the God churches again, but most of us, myself included, if that's what it takes to make a change, welcome to the church. Here's the Church of Korihor. We're going home. I'm going home. Who's going with me? Now, if you would like to become a luminary, right now the process is fairly rudimentary. You go to korihor.org, you scroll down to the bottom of the page, and then there's going to be a form there that you can fill out. And one of the options is, I want to be a luminary. Then I will contact you and we'll set up a time when we can interview by Zoom or here on StreamYard or however we choose to do. And then I will set you up on the process to begin the path down to become a luminary, which we're still figuring out and we're going to suck at for a while. I can't stress this enough. We're going to fail a lot, and we're going to fail faster and faster until we figure out what the world that we want to see in this COAS looks like. One thing I can tell you is that we are going to need, what I'm thinking we're going to call rhapsodists, who will be luminaries, who are singer-songwriters for the church. I'm very passionate about the fact that music is going to play a big part of our effort. If there are people out there who are gifted at music, I want to talk to you. Fill out the form, because I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I would love for every Sunday sermon to include a hymn. I've written some, but I don't sing particularly well. So we need people who can sing. We especially need people who can sing and can write music and play music. But if you can sing a cappella even, and we can connect you together with other people who can accompany and play, I think that music is going to be a big part of the future of this movement, because if people can sing together, well, we can do just about damn near anything. I want to thank you guys who joined us live today. And I promise we will get a chance to talk more about what the future of the Church of Korihor looks like. I believe that we are engaged in the most important work of my life, which isn't much. But if you will make it a part of yours, and if we can multiply it, because believe it or not, there are no rules as to how many members the church can have versus how many ordained clergy. I've looked into this. There are no rules. We can make up our own rules. And we can actually grow this movement as big as we want. As many people as feel passionate about doing what we're talking about here, making a better world. And it may start at first that you'll sign up as a luminary, a person, maybe you can't speak, maybe you can't sing, maybe you'll never do a wedding or wear one of these stoles in front of a congregation. Okay. Can we send you a pair of scissors and some fabric? Do you have a van or a truck? Or take the back seat out of your car? I don't know. Hatchback or something? Can you cut blankets? Can you go out onto the street and find people who are cold? Do you have courage to do it? Because it's not safe. It's dangerous. This is dangerous work. Not just because of the people themselves, because you may have to engage with police. You may have to justify to cities and governments. You may have to justify yourself to citizens of this country. Shockingly enough, why it is that you're going out and putting blankets on people. It'll take courage. That's why it's got to be us. The believers don't have courage, not like us. Not the kind of courage that it took to say to somebody, I don't believe in God. And no, that doesn't make me a bad person. And no, that doesn't mean that I'm not safe to leave your children with. And no, that doesn't mean that I'm a criminal just because you say that if you didn't have God, you'd go out and That's not you talking about me. That's you talking about you. And to be able to say that took courage. To leave church took courage. That's why it's got to be us. That's why we have to be the ones to build this future. We're going to do it the way godless people are especially good at doing things, with courage, innovation, and we got to science the shit out of it. And it's going to be the most fun, the most important, and the most passionate work of my life. If there are other people out there who are on fire like I am right now, well, then this will become the first failure of Joe Rollins that will truly succeed at really changing the world. Or we'll die trying. I'll fail. I'll start again. I'm looking for people who have the courage to fail with me until we find all the ways to fail. Or by some stroke of luck, we go home. Amen. Thanks for coming out, guys.